Okay, it is 3:05. I think we will begin and start and hope that Dr. Walker will join us soon. Dr. Alexander has agreed to do the prayer and the pledge, so if you will join Dr. Alexander.
Oh, Heavenly Father, thank you for this wonderful day in which we live and you have blessed us with. We pray that in this very difficult time in our community and across this globe and across the world, that you will continue to cover us and provide for us a safety and a cure to this most horrible, tragic virus. We pray, oh Heavenly Father, as Americans in this country, that we come together in a unified way to solve all of our issues and bring mankind together as we struggle in this very difficult time. And we ask these things in the name of your Son, Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag, of the United States, of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Dr. Alexander. And welcome to our third virtual board meeting, members of the board and members of the public. Do I see? Dr. Walker has just joined us. Okay, I'm going to unmute you, Dr. Walker. We have had the invocation, and we come now to the adoption of the agenda. And I have a few items to add to the agenda. Item 10A, we have a request from the Thomas Home Corporation to do a presentation. So that will be immediately following the Executive Director's report. After item 11, the Attorney's report, we will go to 11A, and we will go into executive session. When we return from executive session, we will go to item 12A, which will be a motion related to the petition for review by the Thomas Home Corporation. Item 12B is Lobbyist Agreement. Does anyone else on the board have anything that they wish to add? And you are unmuted, so if you will speak your name and add what you'd like to add.
This is Vicki Campbell.
Walker. Okay, we'll start with Vicki, and Larry, you'll be next. Go ahead, Ms. Campbell.
I would like to add face-to-face meetings for CAC and board in June.
And we will make that, shall we make that new business?
Yes,
Madam Chair?
Yes. Dr. Woody?
Yeah, Madam Chair. I was going to touch on that topic during Executive Director's report. It is my intention to hold CAC and board meetings in the month of June. I'd be happy to elaborate a little bit when we get to that point of the agenda.
Okay. All right. So we may or may not have that item, Ms. Campbell, but it will be discussed. Okay. Do you have anything else you want to add?
No, that's it.
Okay. Okay, Dr. Walker.
Madam Chair, I wish to request as full a report as staff can do without having been forewarned of this by me, admittedly, of our financial status as regards our 2021 budget, how our current financial prospects appear to be as compared to, say, a year ago.
Thank you, Dr. Walker. And as you know, we have a budget report, and Ms. Sheldon will be making a report, and I am confident she would do that anyway, but having asked her to do that, I think that's a very good request. Any other board members wish to add anything to the agenda? If not, we'll entertain a motion to adopt the agenda as amended.
Vicki Campbell.
Mary Walker, so move, or second.
Okay, it was moved by Vicki Campbell and seconded by Dr. Walker. And we will now, I will call for the votes, starting with Ms. Campbell.
Yes.
Dr. Alexander,
Yes.
Mr. Perkins,
Yes.
Dr. Walker,
Yes.
and Benson votes yes. So we have adopted the agenda. There are no public hearings. We come now to open forum. If anyone wishes to address us under open forum, please press *9 and it will show your hand is raised. And I have to scroll down, so I might not be immediate, but please do so now. Okay, I see no hands raised. There will be another open forum at the end. We have no presentations. Item 7 is approval of the minutes of the regular board meeting of April 28, 2020. Does anyone have any additions or corrections to the minutes? If not, is there a motion to accept them as submitted?
Vicki Campbell, so moved.
Campbell
Perkins
moved
second.
it. Perkins seconded. Okay, we're now voting on the minutes. Dr. Alexander.
Yes.
Mr. Perkins.
Yes.
Dr. Walker.
Yes.
Benson votes yes. Ms. Campbell.
Yes.
Okay, and they are approved unanimously. We come now to operational items. And we had a consent agenda in the last 2 meetings. I think since this is Mr. Woody's first meeting, and he may want to weigh in on some of these, that I would be inclined to take them individually if that's acceptable by the other members of the board. Does anyone object to doing it that way? Okay, then we will do it that way. The first item is on page 14. I'm sorry, I have a lot of papers to juggle here, which is the award of purchase yard trash collection truck prototype. And I will read the recommendation in full as I have before because it's a virtual meeting. The recommendation is that the board approve waiving normal purchasing procedures to approve the purchase of one automated yard trash collection truck prototype from Action Truck Center, Inc. of Dothan, Alabama at a total cost of $461,501.30, utilizing the national bid Sourcewell purchasing contract with funding for this vehicle to be included as part of the lease purchase that the board has approved for other fiscal year 2020 sanitation department vehicle replacements. Let's have a motion in a second, and then we'll ask Mr. Woody to explain this.
Vicki Campbell moves staff recommendation.
Walker second.
I think I heard Dr. Walker, so it's been moved and seconded. Now, Mr. Woody, would you tell us about this?
Yeah, I would like to start by expressing my appreciation for Randy and his staff and the significant amount of research they've done into looking at ways to not only save costs for our customers, but also, equally importantly, to look out for the interests of our staff who do tremendous physical work associated with providing this service. Through Randy's research and talking with various vendors, they previously took to you a option for a vehicle last year that looked promising. However, that particular vendor had some challenges with conflicts with other types of vehicles and licensing issues. So we've gone out with another vendor to look at an option to provide a way for us to collect our yard trash without having to do as much manual labor. As it stands, a yard trash collection employee could load as much as 21 tons of yard trash a given day. I just can't imagine, even as a young man, doing that and what the challenges that entails. And certainly that provides exposure to us as a company for workman's comp claims and such as that as well. So I think this is a worthwhile investment to see if we can come up with a prototype that allows for less handling of the materials, also has some flexibility to be used for some of our other collection methods as well. If this pans out and we can move to this type of a vehicle, then we could reduce the need for day laborers by 25 to 40 people a day, which will present some significant savings in the future. So I appreciate Randy's work and would recommend your favorable consideration.
Thank you. Any questions by board members or comments?
A comment by Larry Walker.
Dr. Walker, you recognize?
Yes, my comment is that if we keep on buying garbage sanitation trucks like this, pretty soon we're going to be talking about real money.
Thank you, Dr. Walker. Ms. Campbell, did I hear you? Oh, Dr. Alexander, sorry. Well,
No.
Ms. Campbell, then
No.
I think I did hear you. No?
Yeah, I can go after Dr. Alexander.
Okay, fine. Dr. Alexander, you're recognized.
No, I didn't have anything.
Oh, okay.
I'm sorry.
Then Ms. Campbell. It's okay.
It's not a sanitation truck, right? It's a yard waste truck. I think Dr. Walker said something about sanitation truck. I think it's yard waste. So,
Yeah, this is a yard waste truck. It will have the not only a knuckle boom arm in conjunction with the compaction body. It will also have some of the attributes of a rear loader and knuckle boom truck as well. So it can actually provide some dual uses.
yeah, I think we started to buy this from someone else at one time, and there was a patent issue for them. So Randy found someone else. So good job, Randy. I think this is great. It'll save us a lot of money.
And wear and tear on bodies. Thank you for that, Ms. Campbell. Anyone else from the board? If not, we will vote on the recommendation for this purchase of this truck, starting with Mr. Perkins.
Yes.
Dr. Walker?
Yes.
Henson votes yes. Ms. Campbell?
Yes.
Dr. Alexander?
Yes.
It passes unanimously. When will we see this actual truck? Does it take about a year? Do you know, Mr. Woody?
It is kind of a one-of-a-kind vehicle. Randy and I briefly talked about that this morning. It'll have to go into production, a lot of manual construction. So not until we place the order will we get a better estimate on what that time frame might be. So I can't really estimate it this time just yet.
Sure. It would be nice to have it for spring cleaning season. Okay, item 8B is award of bid number 2020-06, granulated active carbon. And the recommendation is that the board declare the, okay. I would like to read it since we're on a virtual call. But I will accept your motion when I finish reading the recommendation. The recommendation is that the board declare the apparent low bid from carbon-activated carbon as non-responsive based on the technical findings of our consultant, Arcadis, and to award the bid for the purchase of granulated activated carbon to Calgon Carbon Corporation, the lowest responsive bidder, with funding through the appropriate budget line item. You're recognized, Dr. Walker.
I move approval of the recommendation.
Been moved. Is there a second?
Second, Cedric Alexander. Second.
Dr. Alexander seconds it. Any further discussion? If not, we'll begin voting with Dr. Walker.
Yes.
Henson votes yes. Ms. Campbell?
Yes.
Dr. Alexander?
Yes.
And Mr. Perkins?
Yes.
Okay, it passes unanimously. Item 8C is banking services contract. It's found on page 22 of your packet. The recommendation is that the board waive the formal bidding process based on the favorable experience and terms of the current contract. Extend the contract with Hancock Whitney Bank for 3 years to provide banking services for the ECUA And 3, authorize the executive director to execute the contract renewal letter attached, outlining a 3-year contract for these services based on the ratings submitted in the appropriate operational line item. Is there a motion?
Vicki Campbell, I'll move staff recommendation.
Ms. Campbell
Walker
makes a motion. Is there a second? Walker seconds.
Walker
Any
seconds.
discussion of this? Thank you, Dr. Walker. Any further discussion? If not, Benson votes yes. Ms. Campbell?
Yes.
Dr. Alexander?
Yes.
Mr. Perkins?
Yes.
Dr. Walker?
Yes.
And it passes unanimously. Item 8D, the subject is CWRF Transmission Main Interruption Response Plan, request to purchase emergency bypass materials. The recommendation is that the board award the bid for TMIRP emergency bypass materials to the lowest and fully responsive bidder, Consolidated Pipe and Supply Company, Inc., in the total amount of $156,092 with funding from CIP project CS415. Is there a motion?
Perkins moves the recommendation.
It's been moved by
Walker
Mr. Perkins.
seconded.
Is there a second? Okay, Walker and Alexander seconded. Any discussion of this? Do you have any questions about this item? If not, we'll begin voting with Ms. Campbell.
Yes.
Dr. Alexander?
Yes.
Mr. Perkins?
Yes.
Dr. Walker?
Yes.
And Benson votes yes, so it passes unanimously. Item 8E, Emergency Response Plan Revision. The recommendation is that the board approve the proposed submittal by Arcadis in the amount of $85,300 to perform engineering services needed to update ECUA's existing emergency response plan to address the findings of the recently completed risk and resiliency assessment and other requirements of the American Water Infrastructure Act with funding from the CIP project CA406D as in dog. If we can have a motion and a second, and I'd like for Mr. Woody to explain this, please. Is there a motion?
Walker
It's Cedric, so move.
Okay, we have Dr. Walker and Dr. Alexander, so it is on the table. Mr. Woody, would you outline this issue, please?
Certainly. The American Water Infrastructure Act of 2018 requires all public drinking water systems to provide a risk and resiliency assessment, which we did. It's essentially a report that itemizes what potential risks there are to the water treatment system. And as you would certainly expect, once you've identified those risks, then the next follow-up step, logically, is to identify how you would respond to, or if even practical, prevent such risk. And that's really what this follow-up is about. Since Arcadis was the firm to help us perform the original assessment, we're asking your consideration to continue with the same firm in order to do the short time frame of just a few months to complete the high-profile things for us certainly are hurricanes, but any other manner of terrorism, earthquake, etc., including even IT-related risks as well. So by providing that, we will, if we stay with Arcadis, we will have our best opportunity to certainly comply with our September 25th, 2020 date.
Thank you, Mr. Woody. Any questions about this? Okay, if not, we will begin voting with Ms. Campbell.
Yes.
Dr. Alexander?
Yes.
Mr. Perkins,
Yes.
Dr. Walker,
Yes.
and Benson votes yes, and it passes unanimously. Thank you. Item 8F is found on page 31. It's a request to vacate easement for undeveloped project, Dolphin Bay subdivision. The recommendation is that the ECUA board approve and concur in the findings of the executive director that the easement recorded at official records book 6194, page 1627, is not necessary, useful, or profitable in the operation of the utility systems of ECUA, and 2, to authorize the vacation of the aforementioned easement and adopt the companion resolution number 20-08. Is there a motion for this recommendation as well as the companion resolution?
Vicki Campbell motion to approve recommendation, and I do have a question.
Sure. Okay. Let's get a second, and I'll. Yeah. Is there a second?
Walker, second.
Cedric.
Okay. Good. We now it's second, and you're recognized, Ms. Campbell.
Just the question is, does the Dolphin Bay LLC own everything in the picture? In that whole block? I'm assuming they do.
Mr. Woody, do you know that?
Yes, it's my understanding they've purchased the entirety of the previous development. It's a little unknown now if they're going to try to develop it as currently platted or whether they're going to do a clean slate and replat it in a different configuration.
Yeah. I was just asking because, on vacation it goes to the adjacent property owners. I just want to make sure they did own that whole block. I figured they did. Thank you.
Good question.
Thank you, Ms. Campbell. Mm-hmm. Anyone else? If not, we'll begin voting with Dr. Alexander.
Yes.
Mr. Perkins?
Yes.
Dr. Walker?
Yes.
Benson votes yes. Ms. Campbell?
Yes.
So it passes unanimously. Item 8H, found on page 43, is Lee Street Sidewalk, Drainage, and Sanitary Sewer Project Interlocal Cost-Sharing Agreement with Escambia County. The recommendation is that the board approve the interlocal cost-sharing agreement between ECUA and Escambia County for ECUA to reimburse the county up to $502,892.18 for the sewer expansion portion of the Lee Street Sidewalks, Drainage, and Sanitary Sewer Project, and all of the costs related to the water main upgrades. 2, a transfer of funds in the amount of $387,892.18 from CIP Project CS318 Sewer Expansion to CIP Project CS0003 Lee Street Sewer Expansion to provide the additional funding needed for the associated sanitary sewer construction costs. And 3, the transfer of funds in the amount of $192,500 from CIP Project RW906 Antiquated Water Lines Replacement to CIP Project CS0003 Lee Street Sewer Expansion for the associated water infrastructure constructions cost, which will provide for a 10% contingency. Is there a motion?
Perkins moves the recommendation.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Perkins. Is there a second? It's moved and seconded. Yes, thank you, Dr. Alexander. Mr. Woody, would you just briefly outline this?
Yes, I will, but I'd also like to ask, sorry I didn't get in quick enough there before the motions, if Robert would concur, Robert Beasley. I understand that we have some last-minute numbers associated with the water that are not included in part of the interlocal agreement, and we may need to pull this item until our next meeting in June in order to get that information corrected.
Mr. Beasley?
That's correct. Probably should have moved to pull this at the start. We were hoping to get the final numbers as late as today and get them checked by ECUA, but we're just not ready to sign off on the final numbers, or at least engineering's not. And so we'll probably best pull this and move it to next meeting.
Okay. All right. Well, we will look forward to seeing this important project come before us at the next meeting then. That concludes the operational items. The next item is the budget report. You have the financial reports for the period ending March 31st, 2020, and the monthly budget to actual report as of April 30th, 2020. Ms. Sheldon, I think you're on the line, but I don't have you unmuted. There you are. I'm going to unmute you now. And if you will give us a report of our financials, and understand that Dr. Walker wanted quite a bit of additional information other than what we usually have. So you're recognized, Ms. Sheldon.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, Madam Chair. The first report I have is the second quarterly interim financial statements. Unfortunately, due to timing and not having a couple of CAC meetings, these reports are a little bit dated. However, due to bond covenants, we are required to go ahead and report these. So the interim financial statements at the end of March 31st show us on page 58, these are all funds combined. They show that we are towards the bottom there for the net ending position. We're pretty much on track at March 31st. A couple of items that are way over budget you'll see on the revenue side is miscellaneous revenues at 161%. And that's due to some good news. We got a couple of settlements resolved and got some money for those. We got $159,000 on the liquid aluminum sulfate case and $881,000 in the settlement of the AENU case. Our capital contributions represent monies that are coming from interlocal agreements with the county, such as the Innerarity Island project, sewer improvement project. As we pay for those, we invoice the county, and they are reimbursing us at 100% of those costs. So if you have any questions on the interim financial statements, I'll be happy to answer those.
Does anyone have any questions?
I would just like to thank Patty for answering all my questions that I had via email.
Sure, that's no problem. Okay, so the next one is 9B, the budget report as of April the 30th. At April 30th, we're about 58% into the fiscal year. And I need to make a correction on page 73 and 74 at the bottom line, total operating. That percent used for the total operating of the water fund should be 53.66%. I apologize. I picked up the wrong columns in my Excel calculation. So we've used 53.66% for operating. We're still in line with the 58% portion of the year that we're in. Some of the line items may show more than 58, some show less than 58. Again, some things are paid up front during the year. We've talked about that before, and they kind of smooth themselves out over the fiscal year. I am seeing some increases or some over budget line items in the areas of overtime, gas, oil, and lube, vehicle repair, those typical things that we usually see during the year. And then on page 74 for the sanitation fund, that total operating percentage used should be 55.22%. Again, we're within the 58% of the year threshold. Again, I apologize for those numbers. I picked up the wrong columns. So if you have any questions on that report, I'll be happy to answer that, and then I can address some of Dr. Walker's questions.
I hear no questions, so why don't you proceed,
Okay.
Ms. Sheldon?
All right. So we are still working on the revenue projections and coming up with, where we are with the news as it stands now and where we're going to be. I don't have final numbers on that, so I don't really want to speculate on any of that. We'll be presenting the revenue numbers when we bring the budget in June. We'll have a projection of where we think we're going to end up for this year, and then also, scenarios for where we will be for our budget for next year. I can say, though, from a cash flow standpoint, we credited back to those deposit accounts about $1.5 million. So those were credits that went on their bills. So that reduces the amount they'll be paying, on their current bill, whether it was last month or this month. So that's $1.5 million in cash we won't be getting. Then we have $1.6 million in delinquent accounts since March. So we're looking at about a $3 million, fairly quick hit on cash flow for now. And like I said, the revenue projections will be, once I can get more final numbers on those, I will be happy to get those out. Obviously, they'll come in June as part of the budget as well. So I think, unless you have some questions, that was all I've had to comment on.
Dr. Walker, did that give you the information you were requesting?
No, it does not, although we're told that we'll get a lot of that in June, I take it. So, and I'm content to wait for that until June. For that, I do want to go ahead and say, though, that I'm very concerned that we're going to face a very difficult financial situation for fiscal year 2021. Our revenues are down. Our expected revenues are not appearing. If we lost $300,000 in March, then it'll probably be $400,000 in April, and it may continue to climb in the months ahead. So we may find ourselves much more than $3 million down by the beginning of the fiscal year. All of the forecasting that I've seen so far, whether especially about the capital improvement program budget, the various capital projects that we might anticipate doing, seem to be based on business as usual projections, and I'm just afraid that those are going to prove terribly wrong and overly optimistic. So I guess there's nothing else to say, but just that I'm worried, and I think we should all be concerned. And the sooner we get to realistic estimations of the next fiscal year, then the sooner we can begin to figure out how to handle it. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Walker. I think you articulate concerns that we all share. Does anyone else have any more questions for Michelle?
Madam Chair, may I just add a comment?
Yes, sure.
This is Bruce Woody. I certainly agree with Dr. Walker's concerns. Staff are just as anxious to get to those real numbers as well, because of the lag and sequence of receiving revenue information versus when we can report it to you. It's still fresh enough that new trend line is just evolving. Patty shared the 2 items information that we are aware of in real time, but a lot of the longer term will be a lot more evident for our next report. So I look forward to being able to have good and frank discussions about where revenue is going and what amendments we will have to make to proposed FY21 to accommodate those changes.
Thank you, Mr. Woody. So that, go ahead.
This is Vicki Campbell. Any chance that we could go back to DEP in light of this COVID issue and see if we could get a longer time frame? I know that once we went back, but it was before all of this, to see if we could get additional time on the consent order. And I wondered if we might go back now with this and with all of this and say, could we push it out another 10 years?
Thank you, Ms. Campbell. I had the same question to Mr. Woody earlier today. Would you like to respond, Mr. Woody?
Certainly. That's certainly a part of the equation. When we discuss things with our regulators, our ability to pay is an important aspect of that. I think the long-term trend or implications are really going to drive that question. If there's an opportunity there, we'll certainly avail ourselves of it. Until we have those numbers, it's hard to predict what will be the best plan of attack in terms of requesting some additional time.
Thank you. I'm certainly not one to kick a can, but I do understand people are hurting right now, so it'd be nice. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Campbell. In the budget report, you also have the fiscal year 2021 operating budget, and you previously received the 2021 capital improvement program budget, which will be part of our budget deliberations, and I think Mr. Woody is going to cover some of that in his report. So if there are no more questions about the budget report, let's move to item 10, Executive Director's Report. Mr. Woody, you recognize.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have 6 topics to touch on. I'll try not to linger too long in any one, but feel free to stop me along the way and answer any questions you may have. First, I'd like to recognize that this is the last board meeting for Tim Hague to join us. Please join me in recognizing and thanking Tim for his nearly 35 years of service to this organization. He started in August of 1985 as a temporary planner. Within just a month's time, moved up to planner. He was an assistant executive director within a short 5 years. There was a period of time from 2000, in 2002, he was actually the acting executive director by board action for a period of time. And then he continued as utility services planning director, promoted to executive director in 2005. He has been the director of communications and intergovernmental relations and government affairs in the time period about 2010, 2012. Again, he provides exceptional service to this organization. I know we'll all miss him very much, and I want to thank him publicly for his years of service.
Well, I wish we saw you in person, Tim, because we have certainly all enjoyed working with you. And I know that you will enjoy your retirement, but don't be a stranger. Come back and see us.
Madam Chairman, this is Walker.
Yes, Dr. Walker.
I would like to say to Tim Hague that, well, Tim, it turned out to be a pretty good internship, didn't it? He'll know what that means.
He's told me that story. I recognize that as well. If there are no other comments, item number 2 on my list, I briefly wanted to touch on a operational clarification and change that I made to the board's direction regarding your gracious provision of 40 hours of leave to ECUA employees. The basic approval of the board at your last meeting was to provide 40 hours of leave to be used for employees in recognition of their additional duties and, in many cases, hazards associated with providing their essential services during this COVID-19 event. Clarification or change that I made that I wanted to mention briefly again. Time, in fact, even outside of this COVID-19, we have folks in sanitation in particular who are all very appreciative of the offer. I've had the complication of not being able to take advantage of the time offered because those staff in particular are actually working a tremendous amount of overtime. Not only is that a problem for them being able to take that time that was offered to them, it's also a challenge in that every time that they're gone, we have to backfill those positions and pay time and a half during that period of time. So to help address two items, I did some clarification, and for non-exempt employees, that's only those who are paid hourly, to allow them the option for whichever worked best for their particular family to either use the time as offered by the board or an alternative to be able to be paid out for that time, asking for no more than 20 hours in any one pay period. I did put a fence around that in that it would have to, those choices for being paid out would have to be done by no later the end of the current fiscal year, September 30th, because I did not want to create a liability on the books that would go on into the next year. Now, this is only offered for the hourly employees. It's not an offer for exempt salaried employees. The offer remains as provided by the board, strictly time off. If there's no questions on that topic, I'll move on to item number 3. Right now we have a collection agreement with Santa Rosa, and for those services we will be, right now that contract ends on the end of this current year, December 31st of 2020. The provisions of that agreement would require, if we wish to renew it, to provide them notice 180 days prior to contract expiration if we choose to renew the contract. So prior to July 1, if we want to renew it, we need board action to do so. While it does not take a board action to decline it, I would certainly appreciate some board action to direct staff specifically not to move forward. In order that you can make the most informed decision on that, I want you to know that we'll be preparing a memorandum for you for your next board meeting in June that will give you a little financial and operational overview of our operations in Santa Rosa and provide a formal staff recommendation for you to consider. If there's no questions, then item number 4. I was going to touch on a little bit of cash flow situation. Patty has already quite eloquently touched on those subjects, specifically that we've been working hard as an organization to try to help our customers during this COVID-19 event. Our cash flow is down about $3.1 million as a result, $1.5 million of that being deposits that were credited to commercial customers, so that's a reduction in revenue for the organization. Similarly, there was a period of time through June 15th where we've allowed our residential customers to defer their payments if they're in a hardship status. That has grown our 30 days in arrears numbers. Typically, they are in the $230,000 or so a month range. We're now hovering around $1.6 million. Now that does end on June 15th, so moving forward, cautiously optimistic we'll start receiving additional revenue, but that has been important work by this organization to help folks through a difficult time.
Madam Chairman, I have a question.
Sure.
A question for the executive director on the commercial deposit situation.
Now, my understanding is that those deposits were held in a separate account that we could not touch or we could not do anything with, and that those deposits were basically in the bank. And so now that we've credited that money to their accounts, does not the money in that deposit line move over into operational?
Mr. Woody, can you respond to that, or do you need Patty?
Yeah, I'll probably need a little bit of help from Patty. The mechanism by which those funds flow, I would need Patty's assistance.
Okay, well, next month will be fine, but my understanding, next month will be fine. I don't expect y'all to have that right off the top of your head, but my understanding is that those deposited funds were money we were holding, and in a separate line where they cannot be used for anything else. And then now that we're refunding those basically as a credit, to the account, that money should flow out of that sequestered account into where the credit is. Hopefully y'all can update me on that next month in case I misunderstand it.
This is Vicki Campbell. I thought it was an escrow account, escrow as well.
Ms. Sheldon, were you trying to respond?
Yes, if you would like me to.
Sure.
Yes, Mr. Perkins is correct. Those deposit monies were held in a restricted cash account, and so those monies have basically been returned to the customer via the credit. So if their bill was $5,000 and they got credited back $2,500, will now only get $2,500 in payment of their water bill. So their water bill, we gave them that money back. So instead of getting the $5,000 payment, we'll only get the $2,500. So we gave them back the money, and then so we're getting less cash back on their bill, if that makes sense.
Well, what happens to the money that was in the account? The deposits that were in the account.
It's basic. Well, it'll be reclassified. We'll reduce the restricted cash, but again, we're not going to get paid for the whole amount of the water bill. So we're only going to get paid the difference.
I understand we get paid that by the customer, but does not the money, the customer, so they're, say that a $5,000 bill, the bill's reduced to $2,500 because they, get their deposit credited, but does not that deposit money that was in that restricted account eventually make whole that bill for the whole $5,000?
And not really, because I'll reduce the restricted cash account, which will be the credit side, and I'll reduce the customer liability or debit the liability. So it basically washes it out of restricted cash and out of customer deposit liability.
Okay, well, I'll have to come in and go over to get it explained. But
Okay. Anytime you want to, just give me a call. I can go walk through it with you.
This is Vicki. I'd like to walk through that as well, because I understand things there.
And me too. I follow Mr. Perkins' logic. It's the way my mind works as well. So I think we all need that at some point.
Okay, I can go through it at the CAC meeting if you would like. The June CAC meeting.
I think that would be great. That would be great. Is that okay with you, Mr. Perkins and Ms. Campbell?
That's excellent.
Excellent. Good.
Thank you very much, Patty. I think that'll be a good way to cover that topic for everybody.
Sure.
Speaking of which, my fifth topic was just another acknowledgement that we do intend to have a CAC meeting June 16th and a board meeting on June 23rd that will be held here in the building. We'll make provisions to follow CDC guidelines. We're talking internally about the construction of some plexiglass-based separators between the individual seating positions, and certainly we'll have staff that are present wearing masks in order that we can conduct a meeting in our normal configuration.
It will be nice to see everyone's faces again.
Yes, it will. My last and sixth item, I want to talk a little bit about an initiative to pursue for this next year. Right now, sewer rate setting is an item that's drawn some concern of mine over the few weeks I've been here in this position. The process pursued here is slightly different than I'm used to, and I would suggest a means and methods by which staff can, and I believe should, provide you some more objectivity for that process. What I'd like to do for next year is to conduct a sewer and water rate study during your FY21 year to provide you more objective information on which to make decisions for your FY22 year, so for next year. Typically, that would probably take the first quarter of the year just to go through an RFQ process to select someone, provide you information, of course, to make the decision whether you want to go down that road, and then the balance of the year to do a more thorough review of all expense, cost centers, sources of revenue associated with those. While we're doing a version of that for impact rates, we're not doing it long-term for all our various other rate and cost centers as well. An advantage of taking that approach is we can take a little bit longer look down the road on capital improvements and do some longer term trend line analysis of population growth, consumption growth, various things like that, regulatory impacts that we can anticipate coming down the road. It provides an elected board an opportunity to do more rate smoothing as well by taking a longer look down the road than just the next 12 months. So anyway, that's I just wanted to give you an introduction to that as a topic of concern for me. Turn that into a more formal random that you all can discuss in more detail, though. That's my last item for Director's Report.
Thank you very much, Mr. Woody. The test of the first board meeting with flying colors. Does anyone have any other questions for Mr. Woody before we move to the next item? Okay. The next item is to recognize the Thomas Home Corporation petitioner, and I believe it is Todd Leducer. If you are here, will you please, if you're on the line, hit *9 so I can identify you and unmute you. There you are. You are unmuted, and you may proceed. Please give your name, your address, etc., for the record.
Sure. Thank you very much. Again, my name is Todd Leducer. I'm a local attorney, and I represent Thomas Home Corporation. My address here in town is 118 East Garden Street, Pensacola, Florida, 32502. And thank you very much for recognizing me. We have filed a petition for review in this matter, and I've provided a packet of 41 pages of color stuff. I hope everybody got that. It is not my intention to read to you documents in a 41-page outline, but if you have that, I just want to highlight a certain number of those provisions in there to kind of help my presentation along. So if you have that with you, I'll be referring to the pages that I'm looking at, and I hope all you can look at it while we're all talking on the phone here. As you may be aware, Thomas Home Corporation has submitted plans for a subdivision called Nowak Dairy. Nowak Dairy. Subdivision includes a gravity feed sewer system that would...
Madam Chairman, may I interrupt the gentleman? Mrs. Walker.
Just a moment. Dr. Walker, you recognize.
Yes, I want the gentleman to know that, as far as I know, I have not received a 41-page package of that description.
Okay, well, I provided them to Mr. Beasley, and I heard back from his paralegal that she had sent it to every board member.
Dr. Walker, it may be on your email as Don Adamic, from Don Adamic. It's a 41-page
All right, thank you.
file.
Yes, thank you. Please proceed.
Thank you, Dr. Walker. Yeah, and if you look at that, it's a PDF. It's got pages down at the bottom in blue. So it's like a cacophony of documents that don't really fit together, but I put them all together, and so there's page numbers. So as I go, I'll try to be very precise about what I'm talking about, and so you can look at them again. I'm not going to read to y'all. That's a waste of everybody's time, but I do want to highlight some things. So thank you very much for that. So Nowak Dairy, he has submitted plans for that. That includes a gravity feed system that goes through a lot in Pine Brook Estates. So you hear that name a lot. That's another subdivision. And then it hooks up, the proposal is to hook up to Lift Station 307. So it's Lift Station 307, which is located in Pine Brook Estates, and the subdivision the Thomas Home Corporation has proposed is Nowak Dairy. That submission that has been made by Thomas Home Corporation has not been formally approved or formally rejected. Of course, my view is anything that's not an approval is really a de facto rejection, but it's not labeled as such. I just heard a board member just a few minutes ago, and I couldn't agree more wholeheartedly, saying that we don't want to kick the can, and that's exactly what we don't want to do here. The exact language that was given to Thomas Home Corporation about his plans is from the current Director of Engineering, Mr. Hayden, and it reads as follows, and this is at page 29 of the packet. And it's in an email to David Fitzpatrick, who is the engineer for Thomas Home Corporation. And it reads as follows. It says, this project is in pending litigation. We have therefore suspended review of the application and design drawings until such time as the legal complaint has been resolved. So if I can use the parlance here, that's kicking the can. We're going to kick the can until the lawsuit's over. While it is true that there is currently pending litigation between Thomas Home Corporation and ECUA, that current pending litigation is a tort action for money damages. There is no ruling that's going to come from that lawsuit that says ECUA has to let Thomas Home Corporation hook up Nowak Dairy. That is not what the litigation is about. It is separate and apart from any type of decision for Nowak Dairy. So I don't think that's a legitimate, and respectfully, I don't think that's a legitimate rationale for kicking the can. Moreover, even if you assume that it is related, it would mitigate the damages to allow Thomas Home Corporation to hook up to that lift station to the extent it can with capacity. So either way you look at it, I don't think waiting until the end of that litigation is a proper ruling by ECUA. And so our petition asks two things. Number one, it petitions this body, the board, to direct its staff to make a decision one way or the other. To tell Thomas Home Corporation, yes, you can hook up, no, you can't hook up, and here's why. So that's the basic premise of that, is that just tell us one way or the other. Because once you tell us, I mean, if the answer is yes, which I think it should be, we move forward with the project. If the answer is no, you can't hook up, then you got to tell me why, and then we can do something about that, right? We can petition, we can do other things. It's not a real appeal, but there's somewhat of appellate rights on that kind of decision the ECUA makes. Right now, we're not in that. We're in a no man's land along the way. The second thing it does is because I think that a kick the can is really a denial, right? We're not hooking up. We're just waiting. It's already been 6 years, by the way. We're waiting to do this. I think that if you treat that as a de facto denial, we challenge that denial here tonight. As I said, this started 6 years ago, a long time, so 6 years ago. So that timeline of 6 years is set out in a graphical timeline on page 3 of 41. So if you look at your page 3 of 41, I tried to do it and make it as clean as I could in color and stuff like that. But we start in July of 2014. Thomas Home Corporation, by that time, owns a lot in Pine Brook Estates. Why is that important? Because Mr. Henry, who owns Thomas Home Corporation, had done some research in topography and was able to discern that property abutting that lot could gravity feed into the system in Pine Brook Estates, eventually go to Lift Station 301 and make its way to the ECUA plant. That is better than a low-pressure system, which you see sometimes, better than going to a forced main through a lot of different areas that would be costly to do it. So using the earth and its gravity field, you were able to do that through the abutting lot. He owns that. Thomas Home Corporation owns that lot in 2013. In 2014, it seeks an informal review of its proposed subdivision from ECUA. Now, at the time, that was common business. I think that's well accepted. That at the time, this is how ECUA did business, and this is how developers went to ECUA. So, in July of 2014, we send an informal review of that along the way. If you want to see, it's on page 5 of 41. That is an email from engineer Corey Snyder to David Fitzpatrick, again, Thomas Home Corporation's engineer. It CCs John Seymour at ECUA and talks about the Nowak Dairy subdivision and how even with a peaking factor of 4, the flow is still below the original design flow for the pumps at 220 gallons per minute. So Mr. Snyder gives us that email in July of 2014, says that your subdivision should be fine even with a peak factor of 4. So Thomas Home Corporation goes ahead and purchases the real property upon which Nowak Dairy would be developed. If you look at your page 10, page 10 is a map, a little plat that is in blue, shows the Nowak Dairy subdivision. So the Nowak Dairy subdivision was originally asked to be 172 lots. That is on page 11. If you flip to that, that's the concurrency letter. From that, the reservation form that goes along with that is on page 9. So the capacity reservation form that he follows to follow the process of ECUA, which is in January of 16 now, Nowak Dairy subdivision, seeks 172 lot subdivision, 172 single-family lots. That capacity reservation comes into a concurrency letter, which is 5 days later, written to David Fitzpatrick. This is page 11 now of your packet, and that's signed by Mr. Johnson, Director of Engineering at the time of ECUA. So he has concurrency for 172 lots as of January of 2016. Now, I don't know the answer to this because I haven't got it, but somewhere between 2014 and 2017, this time frame that we're talking about right now, another subdivision is proposed to ECUA. That subdivision is called Bradfield, and if you look at that, that was a subdivision to develop another 62 lots and also connect to Lift Station 307. That subdivision of 62 lots at Bradfield never connects to 307, and that becomes an important factor later on as I'm talking about this. How do I know that it doesn't hook up? Well, you can look at page 13. Page 13 is a map from ECUA that shows connected and reserved or active and inactive numbers of lots from the various subdivisions connected to Lift Station 307. If you see on that page, which is dated January 20th, 2017, again, page 13 of the packet, Bradfield is shown in, I guess that's orange, 62 lots. And if you look at the little box that's the legend in the left-hand side, it shows that there are proposed inactive 62 lots for Bradfield. It also shows Nowak Dairy at 152 lots, which is 20 less than the concurrency was for just because of the way that the subdivision was being designed. So 20 less lots.
Mr.
Yes.
Producer, may I interrupt you for just a moment?
Certainly.
Our typical time is 5 minutes for presentation. We have gone 10 now, and I just need an idea from you how long your presentation is going to be.
Good. I can go faster. I inquired about that to Mr. Beasley. He said I had no limit because I saw that in there as well. So I apologize if I misunderstood.
And I'm giving some latitude, but let me ask you a further question.
Yes, ma'am.
There are basically two issues. One issue is the disagreement, shall we say, between Thomas Home Corporation and our engineering staff regarding this issue. But the second issue is whether the board should review this. And I think the question before us is whether the board should do the review. You're essentially making your case as if we are going to review it, but it's my understanding that we have to actively decide that we are going to review it.
Yes, ma'am. I think that my petition asks for two things in the alternative. One is that if you're looking at the answer as a no answer, if you see what I'm saying, it's not an affirmance, it's not a denial of our plans. If you're saying that, my request for the board is to direct its staff to make such a decision, right, which is what ECUA is supposed to do. If you look at my last couple of pages, it shows there's a 60-day period where you're supposed to make a decision. That's at paragraph 2.6.9 on page 40. I think you've got to make a decision, respectfully. I think somebody's got to make a decision here, not just say, well, sorry, I can't decide right now. That's my first argument, and I agree 100%. You don't need to hear any of this to make that call, right? Number two, though, if you take the kick the can as a denial, I'm asking this board to reverse that denial along the way. So it's twofold in the alternative, again, but if you think that it's a real denial, then I think the board does have the power to overturn that this evening. However, if you're just simply looking at it as that's a no decision, then my request for this board is to direct its staff to make such a decision. I'm trying to make that as clear as I can.
Okay. You may proceed, but do understand that to do the full case is rather timely, and it's a little bit more difficult when we're all on the telephone. So if you can get into some of the cliff notes of it, that would be good. And I understand that you're trying to do that by having the materials prepared. But
I wish I could be in front of y'all. I really do. Sure. I think I think you're exactly right. All of this stuff has made a lot of things a lot more difficult. But I will go as quickly as I can to not waste everybody's time.
Okay.
Thank you, ma'am. So the important part of this is that Bradfield does not hook up. You can look at Bradfield. Bradfield eventually does a low-pressure connection to the force main on the road. All right. Why is that important? Because the only calculations that ECUA has done in terms of flow analysis utilize both Nowak Dairy and Bradfield in its conclusions. So if you look at the calculations, which are at page 12, those are the only calculations for flow analysis of lift station 307 that have been done. The conclusion section says that, therefore, adding Bradfield and Nowak Dairy subdivisions from strictly a pumping capacity appears unacceptable. All right. No, Bradfield doesn't hook up. Bradfield is not hooked up to 307. As of April of 2017, it wasn't going to. In May of 2017, Thomas Home Corporation is asked to participate in a new lift station to the tune of almost $250,000 and rejects that along the way. Up and including today, which I have submitted our own calculations based on these exact numbers used by ECUA, without Bradfield being included, we want 152 lots, we get to 6 less. And if you look at the map of Pine Brook Estates, the wetlands overlay on top of that, which is at page 31, there are at least 9 to 10 lots that can't be built on in that area. So we get to 152 using ECUA's own calculation, the plat for Pine Brook Estates, and we get to 152 immediately. I don't understand why there needs to be a better lift station. That calculation has never been done. I think I'm the only one that's ever done it, and we are 6 years down the line from when that was. So, again, with you just using that math and all the things that are in here, one, I think, in conclusion, I think ECUA needs to decide. I don't think you can just kick the can and kick the can and kick the can and kick the can. The litigation is not going to decide whether this subdivision can hook up. It's not related in that way. Also, to the extent you think that kicking the can is a denial, based on ECUA's own numbers, the calculations not including Bradfield show that this subdivision can easily hook up the 307 with no impact at all in terms of anything like that. We don't need a new lift station. Now, the property, in October of 2017, the staff bought property in Pine Brook Estates for a new lift station. I'm not sure that went before the board or anybody even knows that. But they bought property in October after we said we did not want to pay $250,000 to participate in a new lift station. I think with ECUA's own numbers, this lift station can accommodate NOAC dairy because Bradfield did not hook up. I think ECUA needs to make a decision, and with that, I appreciate the board's attention, and thank you very much for letting me appear this evening.
Thank you so much. Now, we are going to next have the attorney's report and go into an executive session, and then we will resume this meeting. So it will be important that you call in on our second session because there may be questions and responses to this. It will be necessary for us to break from this meeting during the executive session. So thank you for appearing today. Or
sure.
I don't know
and I understand. And when should I call back?
Sure.
Will you just keep me out of that meeting if I call back?
I don't know how that works. Ms. Miller, can you tell me how that works for him to recall in? Amanda, are you on the line?
I think he can stay on this line and
okay.
Vicky.
Okay.
I'm not tech, but I think that he can just stay on this line. We can go do that. We can hang up, go do the executive meeting, and then we can call back into the same line. That's just what I think.
I think you're right. It previously, if the chair hangs up and goes to another line, it discontinues everything. But I believe Ms. Miller will stay on the line, so he can do that. Thank you. You jogged my memory, Ms. Campbell. Okay, we will go now.
That is correct.
Yeah. Okay. We will go now to the attorney's report. Mr. Beasley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Robert Beasley. I don't have a formal report. I do at this time would like to request that the board convene in an executive session by calling the conference room number provided. The subject matter of the executive session will be threefold. First, it will be a discussion of the Thomas Home Corporation litigation. Second, it will be a discussion and request for approval of the settlement of the Kennedy-Adams Workers' Compensation Settlement Agreement. The third will be a discussion and question and answer context with respect to the Brad Odom and Barlow malpractice lawsuit. Those three subject matters will be discussed in segregated fashion and independently. There will be a court reporter present at the executive session. I anticipate that the length of time for the executive session in all of those three categories will be no more than 30 minutes. My anticipation is that the members of the executive session will include each of the members of the board, myself, and Mr. Woody. With that, I would request that the board adjourn at the leisure of the chair into an executive session.
Thank you. I want to be sure that all members of the board do have that call-in phone number and the code number. Is there anyone who does not have that?
I need it, Ms. Benson. I can't find it.
Okay.
Somebody call me with it or whatever.
Yes. Maybe, Dawn, can you call Mr. Perkins with that information? Oh, I bet I don't have Dawn unmuted.
I'm sending it right now.
Okay, good. Is it? Is there anyone else who does not have that number? Okay. Would anyone like to have a 5-minute break before we start the executive session? Or can you persevere? Yes, please. Did I hear yes, please?
Madam Chair, may I add one other thing?
Yes.
Madam,
Mr. Woody.
Yeah, Mr. Beasley briefly listed off the folks who would be party to the next conversation. Staff engineer Stacy Hayden was also going to join us for the first topic.
Okay. And that passes legal muster, Mr. Beasley?
It does, as long as he's identified as having appeared, and he doesn't appear in the other topics, it's fine.
Okay. Okay. All right, members of the board, we will adjourn, and in 5 minutes we will convene at the number and code provided to you. It's 4:20. We will convene at 4:25. You're welcome to call in before. We are adjourned. This is Lois, and I want to make sure all of the board members are unmuted, so I'm going to call your names if I might. Ms. Campbell, are you on and unmuted? You should be. Dr. Alexander, are you on and unmuted? Okay, I see a hand raised. 503, let me unmute this one. Number 0503, you're unmuted. You had your hand raised.
Oh, order. I just want to make sure they all didn't forget me. So I'm fine.
Okay, yeah, okay. Okay, Ms. Campbell, are you on the call? Dr. Alexander, are you on the call? Okay, I have another hand raised. Let's see who this is. Phone number 3008555. I'm unmuting you. No, I can't. You are unmuted.
Oh.
Would you? Hello, who is this?
This is Cedric. Can you hear me?
Yes. Okay, good. I can. So I guess the board members are still muted. Any other board member, if you would hit *9, please, so that I can unmute you.
This is
Okay, Mr. Perk. Yeah, I got you. You're unmuted now. All right, board members, if you'll hit *9, I have to. It's hard to scroll through and identify you because I only have phone numbers. So I have Dr. Alexander and Mr. Perkins. Ms. Campbell, when you call in, if you will. All right, Ms. Campbell, I just unmuted you. Are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, good, good. All right, so Dr. Walker, I'm looking for your number. Okay. All right, Robert, I just unmuted you.
Hello, this is Robert Beasley.
Yeah, good, thank you. I have to go through this process again. I've got this long, long list of phone numbers, so it's a little cumbersome. I think I'm the happiest person about the new in-person board meetings, by the way.
It's going to feel like a real luxury.
I know. Yeah, this isn't fun. All right, 6094 is Dr. Walker. You appear to be unmuted. Are you there, Dr. Walker? Amanda, I just unmuted you.
Yes, ma'am, I'm here.
Yeah. All right, still waiting for Dr. Walker.
Is Mr. Woody with us?
I think so. Let me through my list. Mr. Woody, are you on the line? Apparently not. Hit *9 when you join us.
Ms. Benson, I noticed that when you asked for Dr. Walker and Mr. Woody, there was a very faint response in the background. I don't know if they need to, if they're just not getting through, if they need to redial in or something.
Yeah, Mr. Woody just raised his hand, so I just unmuted you, Mr. Woody.
Yes, I'm here.
Yeah, good. Yeah, still waiting for Dr. Walker. 9. Okay, I've got Dr. Walker's line unmuted. I don't hear him. We'll give him a few more minutes.
It may be that he has his line on mute from his end.
Could be. What is that? *6? Most conferences use *6 for mute and unmute.
Yeah, I'm not sure. Or maybe just a button on his own phone.
Mm-hmm. So, Amanda, do you have a separate, heard somebody, who was that? Is that you, Dr. Walker? Amanda, do you have access to another phone where you could call Dr. Walker if he's having some trouble?
Absolutely. I'll give him a call right now.
Do you have that number?
I can get his, I have his phone number, and I'll call from my desk phone and try to reach him.
Okay. Okay, good. Thank you.
Uh-huh. Chairman Benson, he says he's on the line.
Okay. Can he speak so we can hear him, Dr. Walker? I show you as unmuted, but I can't hear you.
He may have it muted on his end.
Yeah. Do you have a mute button on your phone?
Very faint fuzzy something every time you ask for him.
Me too. That's why I was thinking if he hung up and tried to dial back in, it might work better. It just seems like he's not getting through, like the signal's not strong enough or something.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Dr. Walker, will you do that? Will you hang up and redial and rejoin in case that helps?
Chairman Benson, he's going to hang up and dial back in and see if that works.
Okay, good. If you still have him, ask him to hit *9 so his hand will be raised.
He's already hung up.
Okay, that's okay. I can watch for it. Okay, he is now dialed in. I'm going to unmute him. Dr. Walker, you are now unmuted. Want to say hello?
Thank you. Thank you.
It's much better. Okay, good. All right, we will reconvene the board meeting now, and we are now on item 12. Item 12A is a request for a motion related to the petition for review by the Thomas Home Corporation. Is there a motion?
Madam Chairman, this is Walker.
You're recognized.
I will. What I have to say is not intended as a negative action toward Thomas Home Corporation. I do believe that it is in the interest of both parties to proceed with litigation as quickly as possible. Therefore, I make a motion that we deny the petition of Thomas Home Corporation.
For review. Yeah. Okay. Is there a second? Board members, is there a second to the denial for petition for review?
This is Perkins. I second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Hearing none, I will now call the roll for you to vote. Ms. Campbell?
Yes.
Dr. Alexander?
Yes.
Mr. Perkins?
Yes.
Dr. Walker?
Yes.
And Benson votes yes. So the denial for the petition for review passes unanimously. The next item is 12B, a motion regarding the workers' compensation claim for Ms. Janice Kennedy Adams to authorize the executive director to execute the agreement. Is there a motion to that effect?
Motion.
Ms. Campbell makes the motion. Is there a second?
Cedric, I'll second.
Dr. Alexander seconds. Any further discussion? If not, we will vote in order. Dr. Alexander?
Yes.
Mr. Perkins?
Yes.
Dr. Walker?
Yes.
Benson votes yes. Ms. Campbell?
Yes.
And so it is passed unanimously, and you are now authorized, Mr. Woody. The next item is the Lobbyist Agreement. Mr. Woody, would you carry this? Would you tell us what your recommendation is?
Sure, I'd be happy to. The board, in approximately February of 2019, entered into an agreement with a lobbyist by the name of Metz, Husband and Doughton, PA, to assist the ECUA with their efforts to communicate and lobby the Florida State Legislature. Each year, of course, the state legislature does wonderful things on behalf of its constituents across the state, but a key aspect of that relationship is, in fact, having a strong relationship. And to that end, the ECUA board was forward-thinking in procuring these services. However, that contract did expire February 14th of 2020. The services they provided us during that preceding year were helping us to develop legislative budget priorities, secure sponsors for appropriations and policy-related issues, work with committee chairs, legislative leaders, to educate them on the importance of ECUA board legislative priorities, and certainly to help pursue grant opportunities and other things as they present themselves. This issue is up just to inquire if the board has an interest in, again, pursuing this type of support for this upcoming legislative season, and if so, I will pursue that.
Is there a motion?
Are there any kind of metrics where we can measure how effective this firm has been? Can we take a month maybe and look at that and see if we have time?
Madam Chair, Walker,
Go ahead, Dr. Walker.
I agree with Mr. Perkins. I think it would be nice to know, in some sense, some way, what they've done, and whether they've done it well or not. I'm not aware of anything that the firm has done for us or did for us in the past legislative season. So without some kind of supportive information to recommend their retention, further retention, I'm not prepared to move forward with doing so. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Walker. I have worked with them during the course of the last two sessions, and they have worked very closely with the appropriate chairs in the House and the Senate to get money in the budget for some of our projects, including Brownsville. They said at the beginning that they got in late the first session where the budget had already been submitted, and they developed relationships on our behalf with no expectation of anything coming of it. As of last Friday, I don't think the governor had signed this year's budget, so I don't know for sure if we did indeed get the appropriation that they had worked to get, because everything is up in the air. I think they're very effective, but it's certainly appropriate for them to respond to what Mr. Perkins and Dr. Walker have suggested, that, tell us what you've done and what your plans are for next year.
This is Vicki, and I've worked with lobby firms many times with different organizations, statewide and nationwide, and I'm used to getting updates, and I just didn't notice that we got an update ever. So I'm not thinking that they weren't doing anything. I just didn't feel like that I got an update. So, I mean, I've even used the other firm, Gray Robinson in Florida, and we got a nice update every month. So, maybe we could request that update. I don't know if we requested one either, so sure. Maybe if we request one, they could give us one. I do think that not having a lobbyist that has the relationship with legislators all over the state is like going to a aluminum bat tournament with a wood bat. So that's just my thought.
So I think what we're hearing is maybe we could ask Mr. Woody to go to them and ask for a report, and then at the next meeting we could consider this question. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. All right. So I think you hear us too, Mr. Woody.
Yes,
okay.
Thank you for the
Okay. I have nothing else on the agenda other than board communications. Does anyone wish to speak to our fellow board members under board communications?
I'm looking forward to seeing you all again in June.
Me too. Don't look at my hair,
Chairman Walker.
Dr. Walker. You're recognized, Dr. Walker.
Thank you. As I think everyone on this call knows, I'm a candidate for re-election this year, and part of what I've done is to put up a rather effective, I think, Facebook page. One of the things, an item that I took largely from one of Mr. Woody's earliest weekly reports to the board members was information about how heavily worked the yard debris crews are this spring. And I took most of what he wrote about it and rewrote it a bit and posted it. We boosted it 3 or 4 times. We've gotten something like 400 or 500 likes and a very large number of shares. Those things mean that people, and let me add, and dozens of positive responses from individuals saying that our yard debris crews are great, they do a super job, and et cetera, and literally dozens of those, 4 or 5 dozen at least, and only 2 or 3 negative comments. There's no filter on negative comments, so that's what I've gotten. I thought everyone should hear about that, and I hope that someone will take it back to Mr. Rudd and Mr. Kiles and the other people involved in the yard debris program. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Walker. Any other board member? Well, just on behalf of the board, I want to thank Tim Haig for all of his service to the ECUA. I met Tim back when I was on the city council. I'm sounding like Dr. Walker now, doing the history. But he was representing the ECUA at a regional planning meeting. But throughout his career at the ECUA, he has interfaced with other government agencies and has really represented us well and has created those relationships with other entities that are so important to us. So I just want to thank him again for all that he has done, and I'm sure all the other members will take an opportunity to do so in their fashion. All right, it's been probably our longest meeting in history. If no one else has anything else to come before the board, we are adjourned.